Start the broadcast.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. This is Jamie Shanks at Sales for Life. I'm here with Haley Katzman, and we are going to be talking about the state of the sales enablement. And I was just thinking the Sales Enablement Society, in fact, because the buzz around sales enablement is that this is a business function that needs to identify the people, the process, the technology to succeed and really drive revenue for the business. So, Haley, this is a great opportunity to introduce you. Perhaps you could tell the team a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jamie. So I'm the Director of Account Development here at Highspot. We are a sales enablement platform here, and I'm also a sales enablement practitioner for our team internally. So it's funny you mentioned the Sales Enablement Society. We just hosted the first Seattle chapter event here and had a lot of great people having discussions on how to elevate the function. So I'm excited to talk to everyone today.
Fantastic. And the reason we're having this webinar is it's becoming increasingly complex. The sales process is becoming divisive, and what I mean by that is they're segmenting SDRs, field sales, channel sales, customer success, and each requires its own best practices. So, and I'm going to pass this to an expert. Haley's going to be driving this, and I'm going to play color commentary here, but want to talk to you about the best practices. I'm going to go off of the camera here, and we'll be able to start driving this. Haley, maybe we could start and talk a little bit of an overview or identifying some of those performance gaps you want to talk about.
Absolutely. So some of the main performance gaps that we've seen with a lot of the teams that we've worked with are really around a couple of different areas. We actually did a survey with sales enablement and marketing leaders recently, and they identified 4 major gaps, and those are really around ensuring that sales can easily find content and training materials when they're actually in the sales process. Another area is around refining the sales process for effectiveness, whether that's ensuring consistency, making sure that the process is scalable, anywhere that you can make the team more productive by nature.
Now,
another area where we, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask you, Haley, why do you think one of the main challenges is finding the need for content? Where do you think that stems from a challenge? Is it the sales professionals stating that this is a major challenge and pushing that up to enablement, or is it enablement saying, I'm doing everything I can to help you, but I can't find content? Where do you think that's all starting from?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. If you think about what actually happens for a sales enablement practitioner and how they're trying to enable sales teams, it seems kind of like a basic concept of just having somewhere where you can easily find all the materials, whether it's external facing content or the training materials like a battle card for a competitor, somewhere that sales can easily access it. But historically, a lot of the platforms that are used within companies are very clunky, hard to use, or marketing is using one platform, sales is using a different one, enablement and training are using another one. And so in order to increase effectiveness and productivity at all across the sales team, you really first and foremost have to have a good foundation in which you're sharing this knowledge and information. And so again, it seems kind of basic, but having a place where you can easily access those materials is critical to actually using them and leveraging them during the sales process. And so most of the companies that we'll talk to will say, oh, we have all of these great materials and all of this great product marketing, but sales is never using it because they can't find it or it's not relevant, those types of things.
Yeah, I've been in the walls of companies that had 3 learning management systems, 3 to 4 employee advocacy tools, content libraries that were segmented by business unit. So it was just a hodgepodge of material, and all that it ended up being is if they were physical filing cabinets, they were like the filing cabinets you would see in a bomb bunker that no one ever touched.
Yep, exactly. So, I mean, if you're pumping all of this time, energy, resources into building out content, building out training materials, well, you better make sure that the sales team can actually access it and use it. Otherwise, there's really no point.
Fantastic. Well, kicking it back to you, Haley, what you talked a lot about, or you're going to also talk a lot about training and the sales content issues. Help us understand where maybe this is feedback from the sales professionals or enablement on there is just a complete disconnect on what is needed versus what is being supplied.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely a disconnect on what is needed versus what is being supplied, but I think that where the major kind of gap lies is that most companies have a pretty good or very great onboarding process built out for the sales teams, right? So they have someone that's leading the sales training, they go through the initial onboarding, they've learned everything that they need to learn to be successful in the role, and then 2 weeks later, they're out actually in the role, engaging with prospects and customers, and they've completely, they don't remember everything that was during the initial onboarding, and that's nothing to do with the sales reps. That's just very typical of, the learning process. And so where we've found companies have a lot of success is where they can go through the initial onboarding, but then also take those same materials and provide them to the salesperson after the initial onboarding. So, an example would be that you're, going out to present a deck for a demo for a customer. Well, why not have the video to show you best practices on how to go through that demo side by side, rather than the salesperson, again, having to waste time and go back and find that initial training video from the onboarding process, which, we both know more likely than not, they're not going to go out of their way to go into, an LMS to go and find that video.
Are you finding that one of the struggles, I'm being onboarded as a sales professional, I'm in the classroom or I'm watching videos on the corporate culture, on the product market fit, on all this kind of information, but it's not teaching me like the soft skills or the sales, like the sales process that we use. And even if it did, it kind of shows it to me once. And then what you're saying is when I'm in the field and I need to recall a play, it's essentially like a playbook. I need to recall a play on what to do when I've got a stuck account. I can't recall like the scenario from the onboarding class. They're not correlating like what I learned in onboarding to I need this in real time right now because I'm truly stuck on this account.
Yep, you're 100% right, and it kind of goes in both ways. During the initial onboarding, it definitely makes sense to train them on the workflow that they're going to be using once they're out engaging with customers, right? And then conversely, once they are out engaging with customers, you want to be able to point them back to that training or the play, if you will, on how to execute the sales process. And so, even if you, teach someone something once and they see it in a video, they see it, written down on a piece of paper or in a playbook, the chances of them, like you said, going back and remembering that is going to, it's not very often that we see that. And so you have to give them an easy way to, actually see how it would be executed and then reference those materials.
Do you have any stats for people on the call who are in enablement, a best practice around how often a great sales professional is recalling a video or a tip, or how often something needs to be reinforced? Because you have lack of retention as one of the slides here. Is there a kind of a best practice, don't show me once? Is it like Pavlov's dog, show me 6 times over 6 weeks? Or
yeah, I think, Jamie, the number is actually 7 times, which seems like quite a bit. But I think that the key piece with having to teach someone or tell someone something 7 times is that it needs to be presented in different ways, right? So if you have them read a playbook 7 times, it's not going to be nearly as effective if they watched a video or seen a best practice from another salesperson and read the playbook and seen how they would execute it, especially with millennials being a large part of the sales force. They're not going to learn from just reading a 100-page printed out document. You need to have videos, you need to have interactive training, and you need to surface those things within the context of the actual sales process.
Fantastic. Okay. So what we want to really focus in on here now is sales and marketing alignment, because there is just no question that, as Haley's talking, I hope that you're seeing there is no way that you could do this effectively just by the sales professionals creating their own materials. They just, you already hear it from sales leaders. My reps are spending 25 to 33% of their time doing research to be able to place a call or account-based sell. And so where are they finding the time to even be able to build training materials or marketing materials? So this is that partnership with marketing. And Haley, tell us a little bit about what you're seeing here.
Yeah, so we've really seen the early adopters and the best-in-class companies that do have a sales enablement practice in place, and where that function is really used as a way to better align the sales and marketing functions. We see a couple of pretty staggering stats. We'll see 50% higher overall quota attainment. We'll see 50% more individual quota attainment. We see higher revenue growth, and this one is, we've definitely seen this, internally in our process as well, a much faster sales cycle. So when you are aligned from a process perspective, from a content perspective, you're able to really cater the messaging to your buyer and where they are in the sales process, and are able to speed up that sales cycle.
Are you finding, in essence, what you're saying here is you're finding that sales enablement, and it becomes the glue between those two departments? So if sales was from Mars and marketing was from Venus, like the purpose here is sales enablement is the glue that says, hey, everybody, let's work this thing together. And that's question A. And then question B, for some people on the call who don't work at global enterprise companies or even what we would call even mid-market companies, where is the size of companies where the number of reps hits a certain level and they decide, okay, it's time to invest in not just having somebody you call in-house sales training, but truly invest in somebody that can look at it as holistically as you're talking about now?
Yeah, good question. So for the first part, one element of sales enablement, and again, this is different for each and every organization, but one element that we see to be very common is that kind of glue element that you're talking about. It's not at all the only element, but it is oftentimes the sales enablement function that does play a role in bringing marketing and sales to the table and really aligning them as a team. The second piece, it is not at all just enterprise companies with thousands of sales reps that are really investing or having a dedicated sales enablement function internally. I would say that we see, once you get above 50 salespeople, honestly, we see that someone in the organization is doing sales enablement, right, whether that's their title or not. And when that happens, we see a quick transition into the company defining a function, having a sales enablement manager, director of sales enablement, VP of productivity, those types of things. So I mean, even within the SMB companies, it is very common, especially within technology companies.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm seeing it. The discussion starts at the 25 to 50 sales professional level or greater. Mm-hmm. And the whole reason is,
sure.
You're talking to a CEO, and in my market, in my world, I can scale globally by adding headcount. So, we're a team of 20 here, of 20 employees. So I can solve my problems by throwing more bodies at the mix. If not everybody hits sales quota, sure, I'm fine with that. Or obviously not fine with it, but it still net the business where it needs to go. But if you are now 25, 50, 100 sales professionals, the concept of throwing more bodies at it doesn't really work. You need more yield and throughput per sales professional because you've already eaten through the territories that you need, or whether it's geo or industry based. So you actually have to get more yield per rep, because you cannot just throw 25 more people into the Americas kind of thing. So now this is
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that companies will either take, oftentimes we'll see they'll take a proactive or a reactive approach to that, right? So you could be an organization where you know that you're going to scale, grow the business, grow the team, and you want to do it the right way. And so they will invest upfront in sales enablement to ensure that there is consistency and that the business can scale in the right way. Or you have more of a reactive approach where you have scaled the business, you've seen what works, and maybe some things that aren't necessarily working, and so you're going to pull in and build out a sales enablement function to better align functions, to identify gaps, to identify areas for improvement, and increase overall effectiveness.
perfect. So what are you seeing as a best practice to achieve sales and marketing alignment?
So three couple things to kind of point out here. The first is really important, and it's kind of at the foundation of sales and marketing alignment, is really about defining a common language between the functions and teams. And this could be around content, around training, around the sales process, literally definitions in Salesforce as an example. One of the things that we see to be very common is that, as an example, marketing might organize content in ways that make sense to how they execute, right, based on programs, events, those types of things. Sales, on the other hand, does not speak that same language a lot of the time. So it's really important when you think about it, if the salesperson is really your internal customer, if you will, because they're the ones that you want to get to use the materials, to use the training, those types of things, you want to cater it to them in the language that they speak, right? So you want to really make sure that you are aligned on a common language, that the sales team actually understands how to navigate those things so that they can use that through the sales process. And so what we've seen be really successful is when companies will identify a few of their top performing sales reps who are already consultative, customer first type thinkers, and bring them in to validate either languages or the strategy, and provide feedback on different revisions or different sales processes. Because they are so close to the customers, they do have a lot of success, and they're able to kind of relate to what the marketing team and or sales enablement team is providing to them.
You know, a tip, Haley, this is something that we tell all of our customers to do. Sales enablement will either run this test or marketing. They say if you want to be able to identify that you have the common language and that everybody understands how to use that particular content library, what you do is you sit down with 5 sales professionals with a stopwatch, and you give them a role-based scenario. You give them the scenario that the chief marketing officer had an objection, and here was the problem, and the call, you walked off the call and you thought, oh, I need to be able to share an insight that debunks the myth of what she had just said on the call. Start the stopwatch. And if they can't find you an insight, an ideal insight to share with that person in 30 seconds, that means that they'll never do it, because sales is all about speed to revenue. And frankly, sales professionals are the path of least resistance. You have to rebuild your content library to be mapped along a sales process or buyer's journey in the thinking that a salesperson would think through. So like stages of the funnel, you know, what buyer persona, what stage in the funnel, and so forth. So this is great advice, Haley, because we're seeing the fall down is not about owning the content library. It's about the adoption of it, because sales doesn't understand how to use it.
Yep, exactly. That's exactly right.
Fantastic. So the next thing we wanted to look at is, okay, so I get this. How are we going to align this and into that buyer's journey? How are we going to put all this together? Tell us what you're seeing in the market here.
So what we're seeing are that, and you know, it totally makes sense, the companies that are leveraging sales enablement to align their sales process to the buyer's journey are much more successful overall, right? more effective content management helps buyers and sellers remain on the same page, kind of as you were mentioning before. And so what some of the kind of action items here that we'll see for aligning your sales cycle to the buyer's journey is exactly what you were mentioning before. Make sure that the content and training is mapped to the buyer's journey based on specific stage, based on industry, based on competitor, so that you are very easily, like you said, in less than 30 seconds, very easily and quickly delivering the right message at the right time for the salesperson to leverage in customer conversations. And that way, they're able to educate their customer and focus on needs, make them think differently by showing them, the buyer, how they could be more effective in achieving their goals, and leverage those, either third-party sites or the product marketing materials to really show that you have a deep understanding of the buyer's needs rather than just kind of pushing or talking about your product.
Absolutely. And this all comes to teaching the sales professionals to think in the buyer's shoes and ask themselves, okay, I'm the buyer. What's in it for me? Why should I care? And they should be able to think through like the natural questions a buyer asks themselves, like, why should I change? How do I change? And who should I ever change with? And it should be organized in such plain, dead English that way, so that they could just find it based on those simple questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of that, as you were saying, it needs to be quick, it needs to be easy. A lot of that, it needs to be very simple from the process of the sales, the sales process, what the buyer's journey is, what the materials are that they're using. You need to simplify that so that you can ensure consistency and scalability across the teams, whether you are, just going to be adding more and more salespeople, or whether you're going back with an existing group of salespeople that might be very experienced. You need to ensure that consistency so that you can measure and refine the process.
Absolutely. So we're gonna get pretty tactical here, talking a little bit about BestinClass, whether it's content-based, training-based, technology-based sales enablement. Haley, this is your world. Let's kick us off and let's help the audience understand this from a tactical level.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the big piece here is that you really want to incorporate all three of these things for the best results from a sales enablement perspective, right? So if you have the content but you don't have the training and the technology, it's not going to be successful. If you only have one rather than all three together, you're not going to have nearly the amount of success. So it's about leveraging technology to surface content and training materials that, like we said, are aligned to the buyer's journey and personalized to the buyer.
Yeah,
so,
I was just going to say, I fully agree with this. We've now trained 300 global customers, and no matter how, if a team concentrated on building the greatest content in the world, but they couldn't mechanize it and put it in the right hands and increase speed to distribution or speed to revenue, it doesn't matter. And then on the flip side, this is where I see endlessly. They'll buy a tool and it's like a Ferrari parked in the garage, but they have no gasoline in the tank, right? They just don't know what to do with it.
Exactly, and so they really need to kind of all come together, and that's a lot of where the sales enablement function comes into play, is thinking about all three of those areas and really being an advocate for the sales team and ensuring that they have everything that they need at speaking their language and, having the ability to identify those best practices.
Fantastic. And from a content standpoint, are you finding of the three pillars here, because essentially what you're showing us are pillars. Like if you want to have a digital sales force, you've got this trifecta that you've showed us. You're going to show us content-based, training-based, and technology-based. Of the three, which are you finding people are having the most trouble tackling? Are they struggling with the creation of great insights, or Are they struggling with the implementation of designing it from a technology standpoint? Where do you see the biggest fall down?
I mean, absolutely, it's for sure on the technology side. So, I mean, you have all of these fantastic product marketing teams and fantastic training and onboarding programs. They're, the materials are there. The companies who really want to, align their sales process to the buyer's journey and better enable their sales teams, they have everything there ready to go. It's just a matter of getting it to the sales team in a way that A, they'll actually use, and B, that is relevant to the sales process, right? So I think that that's definitely the main challenge that we see a lot of companies have.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, from the training standpoint, is it just Enablement's job to help put this glue together? Where maybe you could explain to everybody, where does marketing play in this? I mean, marketing is developing the insights. Do they partner with sales enablement on the training, or do they find that it's best to use only sales enablement because the sales professionals entrust an enablement person because they're former salespeople? What are you seeing here from now the deployment of education?
Yeah, good question. So I think that marketing absolutely plays a role in training. I think that sales enablement will typically be more so interfacing with the sales team, if you will. But a lot of times, even for us internally, the product marketing materials that are created are oftentimes a way or a mechanism to actually train the sales team, right? If you have a new product or a new feature or a new partnership, those types of things, well, what better way to use the customer-facing content that, is speaking to the customer, to a specific persona, to also educate the sales team. So I think that there's definitely a place for marketing and training, and furthermore, getting the feedback from the sales team throughout the training process is really beneficial in refining and optimizing the marketing content that is being created for the sales team.
Okay. And from a technology standpoint, maybe walk us through where the fall down is, because I think that it's very clear that I mean, you could fill the basket filled with great insights, but if it's not logically organized, if it's not able to distribute, if it's not scalable, it's all for naught. Help the audience understand where they can make some of the quick wins, like from a technology standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of main things to kind of be aware of or be conscious of, I guess, when thinking about how technology is going to help your sales enablement strategy. I think one thing is a lot of companies will kind of just wait because from their perspective, they have the resources, they have the content, they have the strategy, and so the technology piece is just that one extra step further, but it makes all the difference. And so, you'll see here that there is truly a cost of not doing anything. And once you do use technology, you're able to see how extreme, if you will, it was, where people weren't using anything that was being created. And so I think that that's one element. The other element to really think about is adoption, and this is something that we constantly have conversations with, different companies. If you're going to invest in a technology to help enable your sales team, help you in your enablement efforts, you need to ensure that it's going to be a platform that is going to be adopted by the sales team. Now, that's in part due to the actual platform or technology that you decide to leverage across your team. But another big part of it, too, is getting buy-off not only from marketing, from sales enablement, but particularly important from sales managers. If you're going to roll out a technology across an entire sales team, just getting your VP of sales to say okay is not going to ensure adoption, right? You need to make sure that you have an intuitive, integrated platform, and you need to make sure that you have let the sales managers and sales leadership have a seat at the table in making that decision so that you know that there's going to be a successful rollout.
Hey, that is the best advice, honestly. We're a team of 20. We are professional digital sellers at my company, 20 of us, and we, for the longest time, tried to do it the cheap way. Content in a variety of different libraries because we just assumed, listen, we are professional digital sellers. We can do this. Well, it wasn't gamified. It wasn't organized, and so we actually involved the sales team because it was them that's really going to use this. They actually get to make the choice. They get to test, they get to trial, they decide what works. And that's and that's how we would move forward. And we've done, and we learned from it, and that's kind of how we make decisions on a lot of things now. Because it's not me, the business owner, who gets to use this thing. It's the team, right?
Absolutely.
So do you think it makes sense talking a little bit about anything else you want to add on BestinClass, and then we could take some questions.
I think, as we've kind of talked about, a lot of the companies that we've worked with or that we've seen are ones that are really looking to enable their sales team, and they're looking to not only just within their own function solve a problem that their team has, but really looking to align with company goals, company metrics to achieve those goals as an aligned marketing, sales enablement team. And so the teams that do that and then invest in content, in training, and technology to execute that process are the ones where we see a huge amount of success.
Fantastic. And as a next step, do you want to field some questions? I'm sure there's a bunch of people. Please, if you could use the questions or chat box and provide any questions to Haley or myself around best practices. Want to be able to help people understand that trifecta. I think that was really sound advice, Haley. Because we have a Venn diagram. We always show people that social selling can't exist without sales marketing and sales enablement / operations. But that same process, the same process applies for content. Like you could build all the content in the world, but if it doesn't see the light of day, if it's truly like that serious decision statistic, 65% of content never sees the light of day, then it's all for naught. And so I'm going to give everybody an opportunity here. I send out a question into the chat box, and I'll pose it to Haley, and then we'll spitball it around. And while we're doing that, Haley, question for you. Top 3 biggest technology implementation blunders, or you don't need to use customer names, but where did the absolute falling down start? They sign the deal, and then tell us like horror stories on what not.
So I would say some of the things that we've seen, so it's actually been the case where we've worked with a lot of companies where they've kind of been tainted by a previous experience and are kind of hesitant to roll out a platform, like Highspot. I think one of the biggest areas that they were tainted in rolling out a platform, prior to ours was really around not getting multiple functions bought off. So what we'll see is that maybe marketing rolled out a platform or sales did on their own, and then getting the other function to align on that after it's been implemented is near impossible. And so honestly, it just goes unused. You don't have any analytics, you don't have adoption across all the different functions, and so there's really not a lot of value. And so one of the things that the companies that we work with really want to ensure is that there's value for marketing, for sales enablement, and for sales, because they know that if there isn't value from the technology for all different parties, that there's not going to be successful adoption.
Okay. I fully agree. I mean, this happens to us all the time. One department gets involved, the others don't, and then the other departments are sitting looking at each other saying, that's supposed to be a priority for this quarter? I thought we were working on these 3 other things. A couple great questions have come in. So the question is, what is the timeline for integrating a sales enablement program, and what materials do we need to have in place before this kind of enablement program can make sense? I'm not sure we even have the right assets we need right now to even put into a system. So how do you get started? Is it it's the chicken and egg question, essentially?
Yep. Great question. So I would say first and foremost, you are in a position where you can be the proactive sales enablement person that I mentioned rather than the reactive, right? So even when, I started building out our account development team here internally, we use, Highspot internally, and, from day one, I didn't have any training or onboarding materials, but started building those out. And so if you think about it, you can either build out the materials and then have to go back and figure out how to organize them, or you can start off doing it the right way. So I think that the big piece here is that you have more content than you think you do, I'm sure. You can use third-party articles, anything that's listed on your website, email templates, all those types of things encompass what would be organized in a sales enablement platform. So think broadly and don't worry too much about mapping out everything so specifically. If you have a platform that's agile and has a great content management base, you won't have to worry too much about it.
Okay. Great question from Rick. One of the biggest issues my clients have problems with is sales reps creating their own content instead of marketing creating. And I assume you're encountering this all the time, because this in a form is a bit of centralization rather than decentralization, because I see it all the time. It frustrates the hell out of me when I see random decks that I kind of sit and say, where did you get that? Like, that's not our material. I don't even know where you have that from. So maybe you can address, is that one of the logical reasons that marketing or enablement looks at your solution is around the function of centralization and control, or is there a greater, deeper value that they're kind of looking at?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely one major area of value. I think that there's two things when you think about how sales might be modifying content. So there's the scenario that you just mentioned, the salesperson might be going off and making rogue modifications or using a deck from, years ago. One company that we worked with, the sales enablement leader said that she was interviewing a bunch of people on the sales team and said that she sat down and actually saw a salesperson using a deck that was 6 years old. And so that's kind of, one side of it. The big piece there is that if you can't see what's happening, then there's no way to monitor that, right? So the minute that a salesperson is doing anything on their desktop, you lose all visibility and insight. So allowing them to make those modifications or changes to content, for us, we use our Microsoft Online integration or our Google Docs integration. Allowing them to make those changes in the platform saves them time, but it also allows you to have visibility and insight into what modifications they're making. And then kind of on the flip side, I'll kind of challenge you to think about it. A lot of times the sales team, they might be making modifications or changes that are insightful or relevant because they are engaging with customers. So being able to see those modifications, if they're using the wrong logo, obviously you want to ensure the correct branding. But if they have some valuable insights from engaging with customers, you might want to take that back and have some conversations around it with the people who created the content.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And the last question is a really important one. Best practice around adoption, right? Sales professionals, how do you get them to use this? If you could answer this a quick one, I'll answer a quick one, then we'll wrap it up. But I've got a different spin on the way I look at this, so I'd love to hear your answer.
Yes, so adoption, two things. You have to be where the salesperson lives. So whether it's in Salesforce, email, mobile, tablet, wherever it is, don't make them go to a different place. And two, it has to be intuitive and easy to use. If it's a clunky, outdated platform, they're never going to use it, you won't have adoption.
I fully agree. It needs to be integrated. The workflow of the average sales professional, email, LinkedIn, Salesforce.com. And if it's outside of those parameters, it's so hard to get them to go to another site. The other way to look at it is you have to ask yourself, the reason that sales professionals aren't sharing content is because they are asking themselves, what's in it for me? Does this add value, and does this make me more money? And the reason is your marketing team has not helped the sales team correlate the relationship between sharing insights with the buyer and new leads, new opportunities, and we'll call it attribution to the deal. And this is where marketing becomes critical. In road mapping, we call it the content consumption story, road mapping the digital fingerprints that your buyer is having on your digital assets outside of sales conversations. And by painting a picture of the last previous customers and coming to the sales team to say, did you know that 2 days before your demo and 2 days after, that buyer was on our website downloading ebooks and looking at all this information? It changes the mindset of the sales professional, and they say, oh, like, content is really valuable along that journey. Now you have a completely different seller. You have a seller that's bought in to realizing that content is another touch point. And until you correlate content to revenue, you're probably going to have an adoption issue because they'll do it for a while, but they won't understand why they're doing it. So anyways, that's my take on it. Haley, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I would say that we will go ahead and send out the recording of the webinar and the slides to the deck. A couple, 4 last points on how to dial in your sales enablement efforts. You can kind of take a look over them there and look at the slides as follow-up.